Hello and welcome to the IO Thinker, where we explore the world of international relations, one critical issue at a time. I'm Martin Zubko. In this episode, we are exploring how a single academic journal from Brazil broke through the traditional barriers of the global north, why its long-standing commitment to open access scholarship matters today more than ever, how its pages continue to shape our understanding of power, sovereignty, and international cooperation. Our focus is the Brazilian Journal of International Politics, otherwise known as RBPI. Published by Brazilian Institute of International Relations since 1958, the journal has spent nearly 7 decades serving as a vital bridge between the Latin American scholarship and global debates on international affairs. From regional integration and development, cooperation, and the contemporary challenges of climate governance, global health, the journal consistently demonstrates that regional perspectives are important, are indispensable to understanding global issues. The journal has also reached several important milestones that we're going to be talking about, including its transition to open access, the adoption of English as a publication language, and its integration into the SciELO, which is a digital publishing platform that the journal is on at the moment. My guest today is the journal's editor-in-chief, Haroldo Ramanzini Júnior. Hello?
Hello. Thank you, Martin.
Haroldo is a Brazilian political scientist specializing in Brazilian foreign policy, regionalism, and Latin American international relations. He also serves as an associate professor at the Institute of International Relations at the University of Brasilia. The journal has a long-standing tradition within Latin American international scholarship. So how would you characterize the journal's intellectual identity today, and in what ways has it evolved since its establishment in the late 1950s? Can you please tell us the official name in its native language, because my Portuguese is not as good as yours?
Sure. Thank you again, Martin, for the invitation. And indeed, RBPI, Revista Brasileira de Política Internacional, RBPI. So RBPI has been published continuously since 1958. I think this fact says a lot about the journal's history and the trust the academic community has placed it in over the years. I would also say that RBPI has played an important role in the development of international relations, IR, as an academic field in Brazil and in Latin America more broadly. In a center sense, the journal has grown with the field. It has reflected its main debates and in many ways helped shape them. I think one of the biggest changes over these nearly 70 years has been the journal's scope. In its early years, RBPI focused mainly on Brazil's foreign policy, but as the field evolved, the journal gradually broadened its scope. Of course, while preserving its identity. And I also believe RBPI has made an important contribution by promoting research on issues that are particularly relevant for Brazil, Latin America, and the Global South. That's because we've always tried to balance high academic standards, internationalization, social impact, and a truly commitment to theoretical and methodological pluralism.
So why is the journal unique? What's the DNA? Like, for instance, if I have a choice between Mexico, Brazil, Chile, and other countries, why is this journal unique?
That's an interesting question. I would say that RBPI is a global journal because It seeks to contribute to understanding contemporary international politics. But for us, it's not only about understanding the world. Um, Through the research we publish, we also hope to contribute in some way to help improving it. We are, of course, a scientific journal, but we try not to be isolated from the political and social realities that shape the questions the scholars ask and the debates they want to advance. And in this regard, there is interesting research showing that um, IR communities often focus on different questions depending on the challenges their countries and their regions face. Um, this makes sense, I think, because geographic location, economic structures, historical experiences and historical trajectories, transnational challenges, all these aspects shape research agendas. So if I had to, your question, so if I had to identify one distinctive contribution of RBPI, I would say it is advancing high quality research on international politics from a Latin American perspective. We see this as one way of contributing to a more geographically diverse and intellectually plural understanding of the major issues on the international agenda. That doesn't mean that the journal focuses only on Latin America. In fact, we receive a growing number of submissions from scholars based outside the region, and we publish research on a wide range of topics. But at the same time, I think RBPI plays a very important role in increasing the visibility and the international recognition of research produced in Brazil and in Latin America. And that's because since its foundation, RBPI has remained very committed to topics that matter to the region and to the societies, to our societies, such issues such as development, autonomy, Latin American integration and cooperation, relations with the major powers. But that doesn't imply limiting the journal scope. Rather, it means connected. This is very important. We try our best to stay connected to our scholarly communities and our own intellectual traditions, while remaining open to new questions and perspectives. Finally, I would highlight another feature that makes RBPI distinctive, and you touched upon this on your question. It is our open access publishing model. The journal is fully open access through the SciELO platform. All articles are freely available online with no paywall, and we do not charge APCs, article processing fees. The journal is funded by the Brazilian state and the University of Brasilia. And as you mentioned, Martin, SciELO is a scientific published ecosystem that is started in Brazil. It has made a very important contribution to expanding access to scientific knowledge and increasing the visibility of research produced in developing countries. And we are proud that RBPI is part of this initiative and is part of the SciELO collection.
Definitely. When I opened the journal on SciELO, I found it like extraordinary, like it's perfect because you offer the text which I can read on my mobile phone because it's adjusted to the screen, but also there is a PDF and everything works absolutely flawlessly. When you mentioned scope of the journal, I noticed when I was opening the issues that you focus on international security, foreign policy, regional integration, global governments, international political economy, which is a wide range. How do you ensure thematic and conceptual coherence across such a broad scope as an editor?
Well, I actually see this broad scope as one of the journal's strengths rather than a challenge. It reflects our broader goal of contributing to understanding international politics, which is increasingly interconnected. Today, it's very hard to understand the issues like security, trade, technology, climate change, development in isolation. So these are all connected. And of course, some articles, some contributions will focus on specific research agendas, while others take a broader perspective. I would say that what ensures coherence across the journal is that every article, every manuscript should address an important question and be based on solid theoretical, methodological, and empirical research. In the end, what really matters for us, and I think for scientific journals in general, I would say, is whether the article makes a genuine contribution to the debate. It needs to be based on this solid research and add something new to the field, some specific contribution. So whatever the topic, that's the standard that we apply and we try to apply to all submissions.
You mentioned that the journal focuses on Latin America from the Brazilian perspective, but not only. So let's elaborate on this a little bit more. What balance do you seek between regional grounded contributions from local scholars versus those who are writing about more theoretical debates in international relations?
So the journal's name itself reflects its connection with Brazil. So Revista Brasileira de Política Internacional, Brazilian Journal of International Politics. So it's just natural that debates on Brazilian foreign policy and the country's international role continue to have an important place in RBPI. I would say also that a Brazilian perspective on international politics is also present. At the same time, if you look at what we have been published over the last few years, you see that the journal scope has been much broader. We've expanded the range of countries, regions, and international issues covered by the authors. So we've also seen a growing number of articles that place the Brazilian case in a comparative perspective. That's what we are trying to achieve in a sense. So we want the journal to contribute to a better understanding of Brazil and Latin America, but we also want to show how experiences from Latin America and the global south can enrich broader debates on international politics, regionalism, development, global governance, foreign policy. And that's really our goal, to publish research that is rooted in these perspectives and also speaks to a global audience.
Let's be slightly more specific and answer the next question. Looking at submissions over the past decade, what major intellectual trends have you observed?
My impression is that submissions tend to reflect, at least to some extent, what's happening in the world. Of course, RBPI is not a current affairs journal, but I do think it's important for us to stay responsive to the major issues shaping the international agenda. For example, over the last few years, we've received many more submissions on China's role in Latin America and the Global South, as well as on the impact of artificial intelligence on international relations. At the same time, we continue to receive articles that visit or revisit some of the discipline's classic concepts, so to speak. So one example that comes to my mind is a paper we recently published by two scholars, one based in Canada and the other in Sweden, on the concept of hegemony. To me, that's a good example of how the field is able to respond to new global challenges while continuing to reflect on some of its core concepts and foundational questions, such as the concept of hegemony in IR.
The same question from the other end. Are there any particular topics that you as an editor would you like to see more submission on?
Maybe building on my previous point, I would say that we need a better understanding of the major transformations reshaping regional and global politics today. Artificial intelligence is certainly one of them, especially its implications for power, for governments, for development, which is a very important issue for the journal, for Latin America, for the Global South in general. Energy transition, global health, sustainability, and environmental issues are also central issues, I think. I would also include migration, transnational organized crime, national defense. These are all topics that I think will continue to demand a great deal of research and debate in the years ahead. And another issue that deserves more attention, especially from a Latin America perspective, is the growing importance of the critical minerals and rare earths and their links to foreign policy, national defense, and industrialization. This is becoming a key issue for many countries.
Let's talk a little bit about methodological diversity. How would you describe the journal's profile in that matter? When we have mixed approaches, we have qualitative, quantitative approaches, and I know some journals are more fussy, some journals are less fussy about this, but how would you describe the direction where the journal is going under your leadership?
One important trend I have observed over the past few years is not a shift from one method to another, but a clear improvement in methodological consistency. Authors are much more explicit about their research design, case selection, procedures for data collection, whether they use qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods. A large share of our articles and the manuscripts that we publish still relies on qualitative or mixed methods and approaches. I think that reflects, at least to some extent, the traditions and the training in IR in Brazil and Latin America. But it's also important to say that we have been receiving a growing number of quantitative studies as well, and we welcome that diversity for sure. And personally, I really believe research should always start with an important question. So to me, good research is not defined by the method it uses, but it's defined by the quality of the question and the evidence it presents. So in a sense, I really think that the method should serve the argument and not become an argument in itself.
Let's speak about the editorial practice and peer review, which is always very interesting. Let's start with the question that everyone is interested in, and that's the mistakes, errors, shortcomings. So from your perspective as an editor, what are the most frequent shortcomings in submitted manuscripts? And is there anything that you would like to highlight as the most common one?
One of the most common problems is that authors sometimes submit a paper before it's really ready. That's understandable. We all want to publish our work, but because we accept only a small percentage of the manuscripts that we receive, a paper needs to show a clear contribution and a certain degree of originality from the very beginning. If we don't see that, it's very likely to receive a desk rejection. For early career researchers, my main observation or advice, if I say so, it is not to see publication as the goal itself. The real goal is to do good research. Publication is really the result of that process. So I would encourage early career students to spend time developing a coherent research agenda, which takes time and demands a lot, asking good questions and producing solid research. So focus on good research and publication will follow. And if I may add one broader point on this, not only for early career researchers, but for all of us, I really think we need to move away from the idea that success in academia should be measured by the number of papers we publish. The point is that the quality of our research will always matter more than the number of our publications. And I'm glad to see that more universities, journals, and funding agencies are starting more and more to question the traditional publish or perish culture. I think that's a necessary, healthy change in a way. So we should reward meaningful research, not simply higher publication numbers.
How does the journal approach peer review process in order to ensure the fairness, the quality, sort of time management, so we don't wait 2 years?
So I think the process begins with the editorial screening. So before a manuscript is sent out for for peer review, the editors access whether it fits the journal's scope and whether it meets basic standards of originality and methodological quality. That first screening is important because it allows reviewers to focus their time on manuscripts that have real publication potential. And of course, it's also a way of showing respect for our reviewers. If we send them manuscripts that clearly do not meet minimum standards, we are not making good use of their time. And in the long run, that can undermine their confidence in the journal. That's why we are very careful in this initial editorial screening. And since 2014, RBPI has accepted and published manuscripts in English only. Ideally, we would publish in Portuguese and in English, or even in Portuguese, in English and Spanish, given our location in Latin America. But at least for now, we simply don't have the resources to support such model. So publishing in English was an important decision to increase the international circulation of the journal and to attract more submissions from scholars around the world. And very importantly, it also allowed us to build a more international peer review process, which I believe has been a positive development for the journal.
So let's talk a little bit about one of the most popular topic among editors, and that's the usage of AI. What's the role of the AI, especially when you have challenges in editorial work versus the quality of journal coherence?
Like many academic journals, I think we are still developing our policy on the use of AI. The technology, as we know, is evolving very quickly. So editorial policies also need to evolve. But our approach is based on two simple principles. So transparency and authors' responsibility for the content of their work. So if authors use AI at any stage of the research or writing process, we expect them to disclose it. So on the journal's website at SciELO, we have a section explaining our AI policy, and we ask authors to include either a declaration of AI use or at the end of the manuscript, or a clear explanation in the cover letter. The same applies to peer review. We ask reviewers not to upload manuscripts to AI platforms for analysis or summarization. The main reason is to protect the confidentiality of unpublished paper or unpublished research and the integrity of the review process. More broadly, I think we are all still, in a way or another, learning how to use AI responsibly. What I usually tell my students here at the University of Brasilia is that AI is an incredible, useful tool, but we should always use it with a critical mindset. It can help us work more efficiently, but it should never replace our own judgment. And in the end, we remain fully responsible for everything we write and publish.
Is there any change that you implemented or you would like to implement regarding the editorial process and peer review process? Because each editor is trying to bring some innovation or some new ideas. Sometimes it's not necessary because everything is working perfectly. Like you don't have any issues, so you keep it and you manage the process. So based on your leadership, how is it?
So in terms of editorial policy and peer review practices in recent years, I think there have been some important changes. First, the number of manuscripts that we receive, the number has grown significantly. Second, the range of topics covered by those manuscripts has expanded. Both changes have required us to keep adapting our editorial process. There have also been broader changes in scientific publishing itself, especially the growing importance of open science and scientific communication. And we see both as very positive developments. Today, RBPI and the journals in general, I would say, journals are no longer seen as simply as repositories of published articles. They have become more active participants in scientific communication. So at RBPI, we've been investing more in sharing research through digital platforms and social media. The goal is to increase the visibility and impact of the work we publish. And as part of this effort, since 2024, we have offered an open course at the University of Brasileira based on the articles published in RBPI. So each edition of the course focuses on a broad topic, and we select articles published by the journal, by RBPI on that topic, and we invite the authors to present their work for the audience. And the course has attracted between 400 and 500 participants in each edition. And all lectures are later made available online. So for us, this is one way of extending the reach of the research we publish and encouraging dialogue with society. Of course, our core mission remains the same, to publish high quality research, but today, the mission also includes making research more transparent, more accessible, and more visible beyond the academic community. In terms of the day-to-day, the daily work of the journal, it is carried out by our team of associate editors together with our assistant editor. And the editorial board also plays a very important role. The members help us define some editorial priorities and suggest reviewers when appropriate, and contribute to discussions about the journal's long-term development in this context of changes that I was mentioning before. That's why the composition of the editorial board is so important. We try to bring scholars with, of course, recognized expertise, strong academic reputations, and a commitment to the journal's mission. For a journal like RBPI, international and intellectual diversity are really essential. They help us preserve the journal's identity while keeping it open to new questions, new perspectives, and with all this objective also to discuss and to contribute with global conversations.
And who can be on the editorial board? Do you prefer to have people from Brazil, or do you also prefer people from abroad, from different regions or even continents?
Yes, we do have part of our editorial team is from Brazil, but many of them are also from abroad. So this idea of diversity is really present in the composition of our editorial board. In the case of the associate editors, that are we, the colleagues that we do the day-to-day work of the journal. Most of us are from the University of Brasilia, and we have also one colleague that is based in UK university.
One notorious question about editorial process: do you encourage authors to suggest potential reviewers for their manuscripts, or do you prefer that editorial team identify reviewers independently?
In general, we prefer that the editorial team identify the reviewers. And over the years, we've built a large database of reviewers, and we continue to expand it. Our priority is always to try to select reviewers with the right expertise for each manuscript, and we also try to ensure the diversity in the review process. And for that, we try to invite scholars from different academic communities and different parts of the world. Whenever possible, for example, we try to have one reviewer from Latin America and other from outside the region. I think that combination often leads to interesting evaluations. And of course, finding the right reviewers is one of the biggest challenges for any academic journal. It is also one of the reasons why the review process can take time. So while this is not the norm, but there are cases where it takes us several months to find a qualified reviewer for a manuscript. That's why I believe we also need to strengthen the culture of peer review in our academic communities. We should invest more in training early career researchers to become reviewers, and in giving peer review the recognition it deserves, and as an essential part of our academic life and our academic ecosystem.
How do you deal with submissions from outside of Latin America? Do you see increased submissions increasing, or do you see that the journal, because sometimes I see, it's a name not in English, so people automatically think, oh, it's publishes only in either Spanish or Portuguese, but not English. But basically, you publish only in English.
Sure. Well, since 2014, as I have mentioned, RBPI has accepted and published manuscripts exclusively in English. We made that decision mainly to increase the international reach of the research published in the journal, to attract more submissions from abroad, and to build a more international peer review process. At the time, RBPI was probably one of the first humanities journal in Brazil to adopt English as its publication language. Today, it's much more common, including other IR journals in Brazil. Of course, that decision also brought some challenges. Since English is not the first language of most of our authors and for most of us, we try not to reject a manuscript solely because of language issues. What really matters at the editorial stage is whether the manuscript is clear and readable. And today, AI-based tools have made translation and language edition much more accessible, and that has certainly helped many authors. But once a manuscript is accepted, if the authors are not native English speakers, the final version is professionally revised by a human English language editor before publication. And the second part of your question concerning the submissions from scholars outside Latin America, I think publishing in English has played an important role for this increasing. I see this as an interesting development. It reflects not only the journal growing international visibility, but also the recognition that Latin America has important empirical and theoretical contributions to make to IR as a field. Personally, I really like the idea of global IR as developed by Professor Amitav Acharya. And I think that building a more genuinely global IR also means strengthening academic journals from different countries and different parts of the world.
Let's speak about the future. And I would like to ask you about the strategic priorities for the journal in the upcoming years.
We try our best to find a balance between making a real contribution to scholarship and society, and maintaining a strong position in national and international rankings. So rankings and bibliometric indicators, databases of journals certainly matter, and but we see them as a result of the quality of the research we publish, not as an end in themselves. And as I've already mentioned, I think there are several priorities that are important. One is to continue promoting a more geographically diverse and intellectually plural understanding of the major issues on the international agenda. Another priority is to strengthen RBPI's international position. We want to continue attracting authors, reviewers, and readers from different parts of the world. Finally, we want to continue expanding the reach of the research published in RBPI. Publishing high quality research will always be our first priority, for sure. But today, publishing is only one part of our job. That's why we've been investing more in scientific communication and in our presence on social media. The goal is to increase the visibility of the research we publish and reach audiences beyond the journal's traditional readership. Of course, none of these is easy, and there are many challenges along the way, but I believe these are important goals, not only for RBPI, but for the academic community as a whole. We need to do a better job of communicating what we do and the important public service that we provide.
The last question for today's interview. You as an editor, you are under pressure because of the journal, the editorial process, the reviewers, the authors. So what do you like the most on your job? Like what you enjoying the most when you can be an editor? And how does that influence your career as a professor, as a scholar, and as a researcher yourself?
What I like most in the job of editor is to be updated about the evolving research agenda on different areas. I think it's really interesting to have this, let's say, backstage knowledge about the production of an article and the process of building a journal. So that's a really stimulating experience.
Dr. Ramanzini, many thanks for sharing your insights, your feedback about the errors, the mistakes on submissions, and the whole editorial process, the vision of the journal and everything. I think it's very good to present a journal from that human side, who is behind the journal, how the journal operates, and this gives a better perspective to people interested in submission to your journal. I wish you good luck at your work, because I know it's super demanding, and also all the best to the journal, which I think it's international already, and I think it will be just increasing its presence in the future. So many thanks for being on the IO Thinker.
Thank you, Martin.